Members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. The first item on the agenda tonight is to receive details of any substitutes. Julian.
Thank you, Chair. We do have two substitutes tonight. They are Karen Lawrence, she's here for Mel Alcott, and Andy Roberts, who's here for Mark Bayliss. Thank you. And the second item is to receive declarations of interest. Thank you, Lucy. Yes.
I'm a member of the Worcester Theatres Board.
Item number 11, as a governor of Kings and member of the Cricket Board. I won't be taking part in the item.
Okay, so let me move on to the minutes of the last meeting of the P&R committee. That's item 4. I'll just go through the pages and just let me know if you have any comments or changes. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So those meetings are accepted. Yes, good. And then next we have item 5, the minutes of the Income Management Subcommittee. So do we have any comments on those? Page 1. I mean, I wasn't. It's your committee, I know. Page 2. So we've received those minutes. Yes, absolutely. So then we're on to agenda item 7, which is the Future High Streets Fund Performance Arts Venue.
No, we've 6.
Oh,
Item 6.
sorry. Oh, yes, of course. The single person and childless couples recommissioning, which Shane is going to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a piece of housekeeping. In effect, we are due to relet the contract and asked the committee for a 3-year contract, but when it came to Policy and Resources Committee, only approved 2 years funding, whereas we should have approved 3 years funding. There is no budget impact, as the whole of the funding will be from the Homeless Prevention Grant. So this is just a transparent way of tidying that up, and if members are happy to accept that, then we can go forward with the procurement for a 3-year contract. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Future High Street Fund Performance Arts Venue. David.
Thank you, Chair. Right, bear with me a moment. So I won't go through the background. I think most members are now familiar with the background in terms of the Future High Streets Fund bid and what we set out to achieve around the Angel Street, Angel Place development opportunity. Members will recall that at a previous meeting, a number of recommendations were agreed, and those are set out in paragraph 2.4. I won't go through them individually, but in the main that was for the submission of a plan application towards the end of this calendar year for the development of the Scala building. Since that meeting and since those recommendations, we have made significant progress on the building, but as set out in paragraph 2.5, there have been significant increases in costs, and therefore we need to revise the planning application to better meet the cost or the budget we have available, or we hope to have available. So paragraph 3, section 3 sets out what we're planning to do. In the main, the significant change is the omission of the 110-seat studio theatre from the development, but the continuation with the 500-seat main auditorium as per the original proposal. And that those details are set out in section 3. And I won't go through them individually. In terms of the funding position, if I can just move on, we have submitted a project adjustment request to the department, and the details of that are set out in paragraph 3.11. So first of all, Trinity House, we're not proceeding with because we've been unable to agree a valuation with the owner of the building. The reduction in the scope of 8 Angel Street, because of work and issues we found with the building, we will be taking that forward separately outside the Future High Streets Fund programme. We have 100,000 balance remaining within the vacant premises scheme, which has proved to be very successful so far in terms of take up, but there is a balance there, so we're planning to move that over to the Scala development. The Panama Jacks building, we have already gained permission from the department to move that money over, because that building has actually been now been brought forward by the private sector, so there is no need to deliver that building. So the reallocation of those funds, if approved, will transfer approximately £6 million to the Scala and Corn Exchange scheme. Originally, in the original submission, we had something in the order of 6.5 million allocated to the project, and if we are able to move that additional money over, as set out in paragraph 3.12, we have a balance of a funding gap of about £500,000. In addition to that, within the budget is a capital receipt for the Swan Theatre of 350. So as we're now not going ahead with the disposal of the Swan Theatre, that will increase that deficit to about 850 in total. So in the light of those changes, the officers have thought long and hard about the best approach to take at this stage, and we believe that the best approach is to continue with the planning application, as I've said, without the studio theatre element, and submit that application towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. The members are asked to note the current funding position and approve the continued exploration of additional funding. We are in the process of working with HLF, Heritage Lottery Fund, to see if we can raise that additional funding we need to close the gap. In fact, if we can raise more than the funding we need to close the gap, we would reinstate the studio theatre as an option. And then the final element really to bring members up to speed on is the fact that we've had continuing discussions with Worcester Theatres. We've had 2 subsequent stakeholder events. We have a meeting planned for tomorrow here at or a presentation planned here tomorrow at the Guildhall, as wider stakeholder engagement in terms of our plans. I think it's fair to say that the changes we've made to the design to accommodate the feedback from the early stakeholder meetings, the discussions we've had with Worcester Theatres with regard to the continuing opportunity to develop the Swan have all been met with positive views. So stakeholder engagement is very good at the moment, and we've had very positive feedback with Worcester Theatres as well. I don't plan to go through any of the detail any further. I'm happy to take questions, but if I go back to the top of the report, you'll see therefore the recommendations are that we're seeking the committee to approve the submission of a revised plan application, to note the current funding position and approve the continued exploration of additional funding routes, both private and public, and note that the business case for the new performance arts venue will be brought to committee for consideration before the final terms of any construction contracts or funding package can be confirmed, and that at this stage the business case assumes the ongoing use of the Swan Theatre. So we will be back in the new year with a final position on the funding. If we have the funding in place, we will be then seeking agreement from members to sign off the business plan and then to proceed with construction contracts for the redevelopment of the building. I think at that point I won't say any more, but I'm happy to take any particular questions anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And I just want to commend you and all the people working on this for the way you've dealt with the changes and setbacks and still managed to keep going forward and looking for solutions. Yes, Andy Stafford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If the project does proceed, get to the stage of looking at a construction partner, is the plan to have a fixed price contract so that we know that the exposure for the council's bounded and that the risk is transferred to a third party essentially for the construction and fit out?
Yes, Stu.
The straight answer is no, and the reason for that, there are a number of reasons. First of all, and we've taken, as you would imagine, significant advice on this, and we've not gone out to tender yet, but fixed price contracts generally work very well where you've got a new build of known design and known issues, so that you know if you're putting a B8 distribution unit up, it's relatively known by everybody how much it's going to cost. This is a very complex project with two old buildings, one of them grade 2 listed, and to go out on a fixed price would then pass any cost-saving responsibility to bring it in within budget to the contractor, and so it would take, to a certain extent, control away from us in terms of the building design and any savings that the contractor would wish to bring in at fixed price. So I think it's fair to say at this stage we are not planning to go out and seek a fixed price because of the complexity of the building and some of the unknown unknowns, as it were, that a listed building might bring us. If that's a straight answer to your question.
Well, thanks for that, but it does obviously mean that the total cost is going to never be known until the venue opens, effectively. and therefore the substantial risk will always remain on the council up until that point.
If I may,
Yes.
Chair, it does obviously mean that until the building is finished, it's difficult to know exactly what it will cost, but it does mean that the council will be in control of those costs and will be able to decide what elements of this design it may or may not wish to take forward if the costs exceed the budget. At the moment, the message I'm getting is that the construction inflation that we've suffered over the last 18 months is starting to flatten out. So ever the optimist one has to be when one's dealing with projects like this. I'm very much hoping that we don't end up in a position where construction inflation continues to be an issue throughout the building phase. We have built in significant contingency for both fees and construction in terms of inflation and other costs in the budget. So we think we've done everything we can at the moment to best assure that we get something within the budget available. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. I got very nervous then when you said that we weren't going for a fixed price cost until you said we had a contingency for a risk element within there. I think I'd really want to know what that risk element was as a percentage of the overall cost prior to any start, because it sounds like because as you described, it's a Grade 2 listed building. There could be unexpected costs associated with that, not around the design because they've quoted for the design, and we are going to need some significant coverage there, so we don't end up getting 80% of the way through and then we find another £1 million or something we hadn't planned for. But if we've got a good risk budget, then I'm happier. I'm more content.
Chair, thanks very much. In terms of the capturing additional funding streams, now to some extent this sort of ties in with Andy and Chris's point, doesn't it? How confident are we that we can exploit both the private and the public sector in this regard? Because it may be that, you know, in an optimistic scenario, we could be faced with having the option of going forward with the studio. Equally, there may be a scenario that's lurking around the corner where those opportunities for funding streams are not as plentiful as we might have hoped, and we still discover that we're, you know, racking up costs in terms of the construction. So I guess all around the table there is that sense of, you know, how can we build that confidence level up in terms of our ability to capture funding from whatever source?
So first of all, just to say that we're obviously not going to let the construction contract until we have surety of the funding position. So as I made reference to, we are speaking to Heritage Lottery Fund at the moment. That discussion will be concluded before we come back to members with a final position in terms of how much money we've got, and when we've got the tender prices back from any contractors that bid to do the work. At that point, we will have the tenders back. We will have, as Chris referenced, details of contingencies that we've set aside, and we will know exactly how much money we've got. If we don't bring in additional funding, and if worst case scenario is that the government don't allow us to move the £6 million from the other projects within the programme. If we're not able to do that, of course, then the project as set out described in the report to members today will not be viable. Having said that, as I mentioned in my introduction, the original Future High Streets Fund set aside £6.5 million for these two buildings, and so worst case scenario is we will have 6.5 million to spend on these buildings. Officers are absolutely determined that we will bring these buildings back into use. The council owns the two buildings now, and if we'd started off by saying to everybody we've got £6.5 million to spend, it sounds quite a lot of money. It's only the level of ambition we have for the buildings that means we don't have enough to do what we might not have enough to do what we want to do. So one way or the other, there's a sort of hierarchy of outcomes that we're planning on. The best outcome is that we get the additional HLF money and we can reinstate the Studio Theatre. One stage down from that is that we can raise an additional £500,000 to £750,000 and complete the development as we are planning to here. Very worst case scenario, if the government doesn't allow us to move the money over, we're back to £6.5 million and doing something different with the two buildings. In terms of the request to move the money, as you would imagine, in terms of the submission to get permission to do so, we've had to submit a very, very detailed cost-benefit ratio analysis, and the cost-benefit ratio analysis is still extremely positive. I don't have the exact figure on me, but it's between about 2 and 3 to 1 pounds return for every pound invested. So it's way above what the government would deem to be a minimum return on investment. So we're very much hoping that the department will see this as a positive way of delivering the project. Thank you.
I find those answers very reassuring. I think we're not being asked to make any final commitment here, just to move the project forward. I think I've got Adrian next.
Thanks. I mean, particularly on those last comments of the Managing Director, I mean, I think it is important to continue to press for the fact that we've got, a major regeneration of an area in the city centre that we're looking for, that we've got money to spend from the government in order to do that, and we need to pursue that and to complete it and do it. I'm also attracted by the fact that the terminology throughout the report is always about a performance arts venue. It's not about the Swan Theatre or the Scala Theatre. It's an arts venue, and that's what we always aim for when we started talking about this. Now, I do wonder, however, how far, given the implications in here about Worcester Theatres and their involvement, how far those other arts organisations and groups are practically involved in the process, or will be practically involved in the process, as opposed to just a sort of a statutory consultee of Worcester Theatres, if you like. And the other aspect is in terms of the money. I mean, I've heard, people out in the community say, well, let's just raise the money. We can raise the money. Let's have a campaign. So perhaps some of those people could step forward and do that.
Thank you. My understanding is that the local arts organisations are more than have been. They haven't just been a statutory consultee. We've had these stakeholder meetings. They might get the Swan Theatre as a community resource, and they know that they will have access to the theatre, always assuming that they're what they want to do, assuming that it makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think what we really need to focus back on, what like some members have said, is that it actually is a regeneration project in terms of the wider remit of the of what we want to achieve in the city. And whichever way we look at it, whether we fail to get the additional money or whether we, aren't successful in our repurposing of that money and the government don't allow to do it, it's still a win-win situation for us. We haven't lost anything. We've gained £6 million to spend on that generation property. It's just a different, it'll take a different format, and our original vision won't be achieved, but there is still that money there for us to use to regenerate that area. So whichever way we look at it, we've spent a huge amount of time, effort, resource into trying to get what we want, and sometimes plans don't work, right? And that's the reality of life. But we're hopeful, we're optimistic, and all the work that the officers have put in and the consultations have put in is about trying to achieve that objective. So, really hopeful that this works out and that we are able to realise something of that potential. However, I think we started off, like I've highlighted before, on the wrong foot of what our original vision was around that project and how we kind of originally sold it, and that it was supposed to be a Broadway-type theatre, attracting all the mainline shows that we were expecting. I think that the public kind of need an apology to say that actually we started off on that wrong foot, and that wasn't the vision that they were supposed to be sold. It was always supposed to be an arts venue, but that got lost in translation. And the other element is, which we've, I think, picked up really well of late, is about that community engagement piece and with the others. And I think that has been left out from kind of the start in terms of not fully engaging that. But I'm glad that we're making a real effort now to address those concerns and take those community concerns on board.
Can I just say thank you for those words from Adrian and Jabba. The one thing I would add is that although we are still a long way from completing this project, the level of confidence that the public investment is bringing to this part of town is already paying dividends. Some members will know that we've had a good take up with regards to our retail unit and premises improvement grants. There is something of the order of £700,000 looking to be invested of both public and private funding in bringing those retail units on Angel Street in particular back into use, and the upper floors. I think one of the public houses opposite has already or has recently been refurbished, and the other public house that's been closed for some time, I've not been past it recently myself, but I understand that is also now looking to be reopened. I've already made the point that Panama Jacks was originally part of the programme, and that has also now been brought forward by the private sector. And so in my experience, going back, too many years, these sorts of investments of public money do bring that level of confidence in the city and do bring that level of private sector investment. And I think we are not going to be able to deliver our ambitions for the city if we just rely, however much public money we get, on public money. It will be private money that eventually makes the difference, and it's encouraging to see already that people are spending their own money on properties around this area in the city. Thank you.
Pat?
Thank
no,
you.
Sorry, it's Lynn.
Sorry?
No, okay. Pat.
Either way. Oh, thank you. That was rather interesting, David, because this is primarily a regeneration project, and with listed buildings, there are always unknowns. We know that. So we always knew we would have to remain flexible no matter what happened. And I think, given the financial situation, well, actually the economic situation of the country, we know that about anything that we do at the moment. But the fact that this is a key project of some scale and complexity is important in the scheme of things, because, and the fact that it's leveraged so much other money and interest is really rather useful. I think we need to just keep our nerve, basically, and remain flexible.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it is an evolving project, isn't it? No, and from the original vision, arguably it's something considerably smaller than the sort of, across half of town. But I think it is really, really key that we are now involving our local communities, our local arts communities and theatre communities, because it is those people that are committed to Worcester that will make the investment in Worcester and know what facilities will work best for our city. So I think, the joint planning with them is absolutely key to taking it forward, and for their, and that brings commitment in many different ways, hopefully financial as well. But I mean, it is shocking, isn't it? In paragraph 3.9, the increase in prices for all construction work since June 2021 of 26.4%. You have to change your original plans in order to fit with what is affordable. So yeah, well done to officers, well done to our communities of working towards something that's still exciting and hopefully will be affordable and deliverable.
Thank you. Yes, Lucy.
Thank you. I'm on the board. I'm the council's representative on the board, and I'd like to say that throughout all of this, they have engaged with the arts community and the local community, and I think this is the result we have today. And also, it isn't just a performing arts venue, it's everything else. It's Angel Street getting cleaned up, it's the Angel Place, it's the refurbishment of the many buildings, it's other things, and it's the pavements and everything else. And in a way, this is just part of it. There is so much else going on, and it really, really is exciting.
Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, Chapa.
Just a technical clarification, Chair. You mentioned, David, on the planning application minus the theatre going in at the initial stage, and then if we had the money for the theatre, then we'd put a revised planning application in, or amendment. Couldn't we put it in at the start and then go the other way? Or is there an issue with doing it with the theatre first and then saying, okay, we can't do the theatre?
You're right, we could do it one of two ways. The best course of action we thought at this stage was to put the planning application in as it stands in terms of the mezzanines as opposed to the studio theatre. We still have obviously the original stage 2 drawings, and it would be relatively straightforward to amend those to include the theatre. But on the advice of our experts, our architects, our project managers, we regard this as probably the best way of proceeding at this stage. But it's just worth also mentioning that in terms of the design of the building, we are doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that if and when we get the additional funding, the studio theatre can be installed with the minimum of disruption to the fabric of the building itself. Thank you.
Thanks for everybody's contributions. I just wanted to ask a question of mine, which is, do we need to have a backup plan of what we might do if both the most optimistic and the kind of medium plans both come to nothing? I mean, you say we would spend the £6.5 million on something that would improve, that would use those buildings and improve them. But maybe we need to plan ahead and think what that might be, especially in terms of having something that would have the same improving effect on the area.
I think it's fair to say that so much resources are being at the moment put into getting the proposals submitted, getting the amendments agreed for the development that you see in front of you today. We have not really spent much time thinking about what some of us colloquially have called Plan F if we don't get all of the money. I think, although this sounds terrible really, I was going to say we will cross that bridge when we get to it, frankly, because if we don't get the 6 million, we will have to go back to basics and just really rethink what we want to do. I think we're all determined that we will produce something that provides a destination. That's the most important thing. We need to provide something that is a destination in that part of the city so that we get the footfall in that area. It's, you know, the reason why the private sector is investing money is because it believes that it's going to get more footfall in that part of town and people are going to come down and visit other premises. But to be very honest, so much work is going on with the architects, with the project managers, with our own internal staff submitting the revisions to the department. We haven't yet thought about, well, we've given some thought to what else we might do, but we've not firmed up any particular plans.
Okay.
And let's hope that we won't get to that point.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
So can I ask members to agree the recommendation in paragraph 1? Thank you, everybody. So we move on to agenda item 8, the draft medium-term financial plan and draft budget and council tax. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is the next iteration in our comprehensive budget setting process for the current year. The primary purpose of this report is actually to set the council tax base so that our major precepting bodies and the parish councils can go on and do their own working. So recommendation 1.2 is subject to approval. The rest of the report is primarily about just setting a background so that we can go through the process of discussion at the committees about areas that we want to reflect on and change, and any proposals which we want to consider for bringing through to the Income Management Committee at the end of January, and also then the Policy and Resources Committee in February, where we'll make the decisions about what we want and don't want to include in the budget. Now, what's going to shape that in the first instance is the amount of funding which we're going to get from central government. We won't know that until the 20th or 21st of this month, but the Secretary of State made an announcement yesterday which was positive in that it confirmed that there would be core spending power plus 3% for all local authorities, which is good news. I'll explain a little bit more in precise numerical terms of that in a minute. If you just turn to paragraph 3.3, at the top of page 33, you can see there in the little table that there is actually room for growth in the local government overalls planned spend. So that wasn't a surprise, although, you know, it would have been nice if it was a core spending power plus 10%, but, you know, we'll live with 3%. What that means in significant terms, in paragraph 4.4, on page 34, the table there which shows in very summary of the medium-term financial plan and reflects the forecast budget gap at the moment of just over £3 million. Now, you'll notice that the services grants and the new homes bonus for budget, those two lines in that table, don't have any figures in them at the moment, and that's why it's as high as £3 million. And underneath that, you'll see on page 35, two elements which we can fill in there. So last year, new homes bonus was worth 890,000, and the services grants from government 300,000. So 1.1 million, and we now anticipate that for this year that will be met. So we should get 1.2 million in, which will reduce our 3 million gap by that amount. And then there are a couple of other funding streams. Homelessness support funding, again, that is a one-off. It comes through every year, so we have no guarantee that we will receive that, but our assumption is that we will continue to receive homelessness support funding. But what we need to do is a little bit of work around how much of that can be used for existing costs as opposed to any new pressures, because obviously anything new and additional costs that we have to incur will then reduce the amount that we have available to reduce our budget gap. And similarly with other grants, UK SPF and Ukrainian funding, which we'll see later on in a separate agenda item, and other elements, we calculate that quite a substantial element of that could be used for existing delivery as well. We, as members will be aware, we already have a target of £190,000 from government grants to go into base budgets, but I think we can reasonably extend that to that extent. If all of that is possible and all comes to fruition, then that would take £2 million out of our 3 million gap, and that then leaves us with £1 million to in very general terms, to find. There are three broad ways we can do that. We can increase income, we can reduce costs, and we can apply our balances. So moving down to the next element, which is the increase in income, paragraph 4.3 reflects some of the areas that we're looking to increase income. Overall, we've set a target for managers to come back with a 7.5% increase in fees and charges across the board. In some cases, it's likely to be higher than that, in some cases lower, according to the particular requirements of each service area. But we've included, as is our normal practice this time, to include estimates of what those income increases might be, and set out in the table at 4.3 are some of the areas where we're expecting an increase. Now, those, just to be clear, the difference and the column at the end there isn't the full amount of increase budget to budget. That's just showing the gap from where we're forecasting to be in 2023 to where we're proposing to be next year. So the actual amount of income, extra income we'll generate, is less than those shown in that column. Just to be clear about that, there is a specific figure which I'll come back to in a minute. So if those fees and charges, we're also expecting increased income in terms of interest rates, because with the cash that we're holding, we're generating a lot more in terms of interest on those than we have before. So that's an area which will help us out as well. In paragraph 5.1, that starts to bring all of those things together. So you can see the actual estimate of increase from fees and charges income is 564,000, which is in the middle of that central column there, and the interest receivable at the bottom is 593. The other figure there, council tax, we've also already taken into account. Now this year the government is allowing an increase of 2.99% or £6, which is what it broadly equates to, as opposed to the normal 2%. So we've assumed that council tax, which is part of our core spending power calculation, will be achieved, but that again is a decision for members to take place at the council meeting rather than for the moment. We're just reflecting that as an assumption for the time being. In terms of reducing costs, we have a couple of areas which we're looking to explore. There's more work going on in the background, but there are two that have come forward at the moment, which are in paragraph 5.1, include the support that we give to the county council. We committed a couple of years ago to contribute 157,000 towards the libraries in the city. For 2 years, the county didn't take that money because they had sufficient money from other sources. This year they have. We've been inflating it year on year, so currently budgeted for 178,000. So that's one area that we could reduce spend. We need to discuss with the county that potential impact of that. And then the final paragraph there, we look potentially at our third-party community grants. Our lotteries continue to progress. We're currently raising £30,000 per year for good causes through that. So potentially there is an opportunity to swap out some of our community grant funding and replace that with lottery funding. But again, these are just thoughts, areas which we want to consider that members will take into account when we get to the P&R in February. The final area, earmark reserves. As things stand, if we have to find the whole of that £1 million from our current unallocated earmark reserves, we won't have sufficient reserves to meet requirement. Okay, so we've got to free up some of our existing reserves. Appendix 4 sets out a number of reserves which we've been looking at where either the project's finished or we haven't funded it from the reserve, we funded it from somewhere else. And a number of reserves where there are ongoing expectations that spend in those areas, but there are no specific plans at the moment. I won't go through them in detail, but just draw your attention to a small error at the bottom of the page there, where it should say 128,000, not 1.285 million. So the 5 is redundant, which reduces the amount. But in total, if we were able to agree to release these reserves, that would free up 629,000. So that plus the savings in respect to the libraries and other areas and other elements might just about bring us to a position where we can set a balanced budget without having to go any further into our risk reserves, which are there to help meet us in case of unforeseen events. It has to be borne in mind that these are one-offs. So once these reserves are released, that's not going to baseline budgets. We'll be back again in exactly the same position next year. So we've got to continue to think about efficiencies. Just to say, so we normally say at this stage that if members have any proposals for increased spend, that they come through to us as early as possible so that we can take them through to committees in a sensible way. But it's very clear from the position we're in that there are no additional reserves that we can free up. So if members do wish to bring forward proposals to committees in January, they will need to come with a clear statement as to where the funding will come from, because it's evident at the moment that there are no further reserves that we can free up to meet those additional costs. So bear that in mind, please. If you do want to bring forward proposals, then come to me as soon as possible, as early as possible, and then we'll try and work with you to see whether or not there are other ways in which we can fund those proposals. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I have Lucy.
I've got a declaration of interest. I'm on the Warndon Parish Council, and also a technical thing on Appendix 4. We actually haven't got the first column, so we don't actually know where any of the yeah. Yeah.
This is, as I say, it's not a proposal to debate these now.
No. But it was just.
Comments? Lynn.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of work gone into this. Yeah, and I have looked down and sort of cross-matched Appendix 4. It's kind of the equivalent of looking down the back of the settee, isn't it, for the loose change? Most of which, you know, as far as I can judge, seems reasonable. I mean, it does indicate the overall financial situation that local government finds itself in. I mean, well done to our officers, because I think, you know, prudent decisions in the past and careful management, we are in a better state than many local councils. The sheer scale of kind of central government uncertainty, it just makes it really, really difficult in terms of, you know, our decision making, our ability to work out what we can do, what we need to do. You know, one example is food waste collection. It was going to be a must do, and now it's been batted back into the distance. Do we still need the money? Are we going to have to do it when? Is really challenging. And of course, the chaos from the Liz Truss episode in which, you know, an autumn statement was made that completely just threw everything into chaos, and that we're now, as a country, having to build back out of. So it does make our decision making difficult, and in terms of government funding, very uncertain. I mean, one of the key ones for me, and particularly, you know, the homelessness support funding. So we have got this 6 months worth in this current financial year. Have we any notion whether that will continue into next financial year? Because if not, that is something that I would want us to identify, or to find a way of meeting those needs, potentially ahead of other things. So I think, you know, that's a really critical one to me. There are some, there's a number of decisions built into this which are maybe not all comfortable, but on the whole, I think they're the right assumptions to be built in. Really pleased, you know, that we're the assumption, for example, around the real living wage. That's absolutely critical to, I think, know what our values as a council are, and to hang on to those. So well done for the amount of work here. It's a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge depending what central government befalls upon us, I think.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So in terms of the forward planning, the Secretary of State statement yesterday was that this would be a 2-year arrangement. So while they didn't give any precise figures about the second year, it implied that we would get that core spending power for 2 years rather than 1 year, which was good. And in terms of the homelessness funding, no, there's no guarantees that we will get it. I mean, it is one-off funding, but there is significant risks related to that. And because of that reason, we have been building up future projected spend on that. So the reserve is now around £800,000. So there's been a long process of ensuring that there was sufficient funding in the event that the funding doesn't materialise for the next year. So we do have some coverage in the event that that funding doesn't come forward. But yeah, I'm sure there will be an element of it. It's just how much, really.
Chair, thank you. Shane, it's a quick one, really. In terms of the funding streams, when we last spoke on this, there was quite a degree of uncertainty about. Is it starting to sort of firm up now? This is what we're going to get essentially within the funding stream, sort of that you highlighted there. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I mean, it's clear as we can. We haven't seen the figures yet, but the statement is unequivocal. There will be a 3% increase in core spending power.
And just, I mean, Lynn's made the point about homelessness support funding. I think we would all share the concern about it. But the government since 2019 has had a pretty impressive record on this, and I would hope that it would continue. I'm sure everyone around the table would, but obviously, as you've illustrated, that their funding arrangements based on an annual appraisal are not ideal under those circumstances. But overall, up till now, I think particularly, that particular sort of item has been pretty well supported through this Parliament, at least.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, again, officers, thank you. It's always a busy time of the year when it comes to the money bit, and it's never easy, and we always have to make some decisions. I think it's just a comment that we will close that gap and we will get a balanced budget. We may not all agree on exactly how we do that, and that will come through discussion through in January when we consult, but I'm pretty confident that we'll get there, looking at the numbers that you've outlined there and where there's room for small wiggle room or manoeuvre. But it's not sustainable over the next few years, as you quite rightly put out. And I think this is where fundamentally different groups differ. I'm not expecting the government to keep handing money down to me. It'd be very nice if they do and make our job as councillors really easy. But actually, we need to look at how we can generate our own income and help ourselves. And I think there's a few ideas that will be coming through income generation in the next 6 months or something that may well plug some of those big gaps and be of real benefit across the city in terms of homes and also ensuring we don't spend additional money on having to house people because in emergency or temporary accommodation. So I'm relatively optimistic that we have a way forward, but I do appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, and I promise not to give you too many different options before the 31st of December. Not none, but
Thank you. I have Pat next.
Thank you. Took some of the words out of my mouth, Chris. There's not much wiggle room really in this budget. Let's face it. It's one of the tightest I've seen in 17 years. So yeah, this is going to be a tough year. And Sean, you've done a splendid job really so far. I dare say there'll be some disagreements, but they'll be fairly minor as we go through. One thing I did want to ask though, and it's possibly a minor point, is we've never really got around to replacing the cremators. And we do pay a penalty for using old cremators at the moment. I'm not sure what the scale of that is. Do you remember what that is?
I think that probably the best way to answer that is that there is a report coming forward in respect of the crematorium and its current position and the options that we need to take in respect of that. And you know, I don't want to preempt anything that's in that report. So at the moment, we are continuing to create a reserve for the replacement of the cremators in due course. We think at the moment we have more in there than we need currently. So we're looking under this to actually release some of that. But we will continue to build it up and continue to plan for that. But as I say, I think there's a more detailed piece of work, and I feel more comfortable leaving it for that report to come forward, and then members will be properly informed about how we're dealing with that particular topic. Is that okay, Pat?
Thanks. I look forward to that because it's quite an interesting one, I think. And the other thing is, I mean, I think you've been quite creative at Income Generation in your approach to a housing scheme, a potential housing scheme, because it does mean we don't have to set up an arm's length corporation, and that would have been a complicated and expensive business. So this scheme, this possibility, looks like a good one to me. So, you know, I'm very pleased to see that as an option.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, for a number of years now, we've been looking at ways to generate further income, and every time we come up with a great new idea, the government says, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. So let's not get too carried away, shall we? The one I just wanted to draw attention to was in 5.1.2, the list of areas they're looking at community grants. I don't see the correlation between the community lottery and reducing the community grant budget by 25,000, because that's something I think that you know we would want to hold on to as a consistent safety net for a range of options with smaller groups, particularly in the voluntary independent sector. So just flag that up at this point.
Through you, Chair, just to comment on that. Yeah, it's in there is because obviously we need to be looking at areas in which where we can reduce costs or become more efficient, and funding that we give to third parties, there is always opportunity for them to find funding from other sources as well as the council. So it's one that's put forward for consideration. The fact that there is an alternative in terms of going to the lottery and generating income in that way is one of the reasons why we perhaps might suggest this as an easier area to look at than some other areas. So that's why it's put forward. We will continue to look at opportunities for reducing costs and becoming more efficiency over the next few weeks. That was just one of the thoughts which came to the surface in the discussions. Simple as that, really.
Let me just add, you know, it's a relative. Sorry. I mean, just about, it's a relatively minor amount of money, and I don't think it's kind of mutually exclusive. We could do more to promote the lottery and encourage more involvement in that without taking 25k out of a pot that actually delivers very considerable value for money into our community group.
Through you, Chair, of course, but it is one that can potentially be replaced from other sources. And I accept that it's a small amount, but every little will count in this year's budget in terms of getting to a position where we can close our budget gap and maintain a reasonable level of support to the community organisations that we provide funding for. So it's a balance to be struck, as always. Yes.
Does anybody else wish to? Oh, Jabba, sorry, Jabba.
It's okay, Chair, not a problem. I mean, look, it's clear that this is, this is the first of a series of budgets, that very difficult budgets that this council is going to be asked to set. It's not going to be a one-off solution to that. And I kind of urge members again, like I always say, that actually this is true leadership is making the most difficult choices and the unpopular choices when it comes to that, and realising and keeping firm in your belief that they will benefit the city in the long run. And having said that, where certain items have been off limits and sacrosanct, and it's time to consider some of those items that we've never kind of considered before, and some of them are outlined in here. Our traditional cash cows that are, the big budget items that bring in the money, the way the usage of those and how they are playing out in the next 15 to 20 years, we need to have a more strategic direction. And are we always going to be solely relying on those income streams? Are there other areas that we can look at? And that's possibly something that through the various committees that we need to start looking at. And so our dependency on certain items is reduced, and our risks spread across the others, and willing to have that discussion. But although I'm optimistic, but the prudent decisions that we're going to be making now will pay off long term in there. So I urge the council to make some of those difficult decisions.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to comment on Councillor Stevens' departure at this moment. I did speak to him before the meeting began, and he said he wasn't feeling at all well, and he had an upset stomach, and he thought he might not be able to stay for very long. So I hope everybody is content with that explanation. Thanks for everybody's contributions. Are we happy to agree the recommendation in paragraph 1? Thank you. Thank you. We're now on agenda item 9, the use of the Managing Director's urgency powers. Is that Ushane?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Just before I go on, just to thank members for their thanks at the last moment, and just to make the point that the thanks are entirely due to Mark and his team for putting all the information together. I'm a mere mouthpiece for this particular project.
We know that, Shane.
Yeah, good. As long as you understand that, that's fine. Use of Managing Director's urgency powers. This is a report which pulls together 3 instances where we've been working to a timetable which didn't neatly fit in with the committee timetable. So in those circumstances, we use the urgency powers to make sure we can meet the commitments from outside bodies. The first is in respect of the business rates pool. So we've been operating a pool for some years now. This latest iteration incorporates Herefordshire Council, and because Herefordshire Council is like Worcestershire County Council, is a top-up authority, which means we get to keep more of our money locally rather than it going to central government. So it's an advantage to us. As a sort of sweetener for that, if I can use that expression, we've given a slightly higher balance towards Herefordshire for the first year, then that will return to the normal distribution after that. So it was agreed amongst the treasurers that that was of benefit to us, so we accepted that, and have submitted our submission to the department for the pool for the coming year, which has been accepted. We do have a 28-day decision period following the settlement. So if something comes through in the settlement which makes that look like a bad decision, we can change our mind, and that would then dissolve the pool. So it's not the last stage in the process. So there are no risks associated with using those urgency powers in that case. The second is in respect of urgency powers to implement a scheme for additional financial support for Ukrainian refugees. So this is funding which we'll be receiving via the County Council, and they were requesting information to be brought together as to how this might be used. I think David might comment a little bit on the way that that process has gone in terms of the extra decisions that have been made in respect of that. But again, we were working to a timetable which meant that we needed to get our decisions in line with what other councils across Worcestershire were doing in time. So that has now been agreed with the Chair and Vice Chair of Communities Committee, which is a relevant committee in this case. And so we've begun the process of implementing that. And the third is in respect of the Household Support Fund. So this is an extension of a grant which was received last year, and for which a certain amount, 899,000, is devolved to districts in Worcestershire, of which our share is 189,000. And again, the County Council were wanting a report back by November as to how we were planning to use that money. So in discussion with the Chair and Vice Chair of Health and Wellbeing Committee, we agreed a programme of use for that funding, which is set out in the table in paragraph 4.24, which is a summary of the proposed allocations are there. So in each case, we've gone through the process of using urgency powers, and now are reporting formally back to committee on that use. So hopefully members are content to accept that, but if there are any further questions, I'll be, David or myself will be happy to take those.
Yes, I have Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's more by nature of a comment rather than a question, because I think we really ought to stay in the pooled business rate unless there's a major change in government thinking on business rates, and they are looking at them now, I know, so we'll need to keep an eye on it. But generally speaking, the business rates pool has given us tremendous resilience, and I've got strong memories, as some around this table will, of the £1.5 million blow that we took when the courts decided not to charge business rates on newly purpose-built doctor's surgeries. And if we hadn't been in the business rates pool at the time, we'd have been in deep trouble. So generally speaking, unless there's a massive change in government policy on business rates, I think we ought to stay in.
Through you, Chair, I entirely agree. In fact, also because of the way that risks were managed within that fund, we did receive a 2 million take from the fund a couple of years ago. So that's gone into our underlying reserves. So that was a very prudent thing to do. And secondly, the government has now formally put back its review of the business rate system for at least 2 years. So that won't happen during the lifetime of this current settlement. It's essential that we continue to build that robustness, because we don't know how that might look in 2 years' time.
Do I have any other people wishing?
I mean, just to commend the decisions around the household support grant. I mean, obviously, as chair of Health and Wellbeing Committee, I was involved in agreeing those in terms of the emergency powers. I mean, it is a sad state of affairs that is necessary, and that people, working households in receipt of universal credit, so people whose income, what their salary is insufficient to meet their housing costs, their heating costs, or whatever. So we are, this is an important safety net that we are putting in place for our citizens in our city. And it's sad that that's necessary, but it is right that we do so. And I think the figure around something for marketing and promotion is actually really quite important as well, because there is are current services and systems actually reaching everybody that really needs it, and are people able to know their rights in terms of claiming and in terms of accessing these funds and this money is a really important part of what we do for our residents.
Does anyone else wish to ask a question or comment? Or
One more comment at the end if there are no more questions.
okay, please do.
Thank you, Chair. Just in reference to the table at paragraph 3.12, top of page 61, just the point I made about elaborating on one element of that. The first line was the host winter payment, which is £200 per host. So that was something the City Council promoted and is proposed to fund. Since this date, the County Council has agreed that that is a good idea and has agreed to fund that element of it. So that part of the money will then be freed up for other use, and we really then redistribute it across the other elements or establish a further use for it. But it was good. It was a good initiative on the City Council's part, which has now been picked up and is going to be shared across the county. So just wanted to draw members' attention to that particular one.
Thank you, Shane. So if there are no more questions, can I ask members to approve the recommendation in paragraph 1? Thank you, everybody. So we're now on to item 10, which is appointments to outside bodies. Is this you, Shane? Julian. Oh, Julian.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very brief report, and it links back to the decision which was taken at the council meeting on 29th of November, where Councillor Mitchell was appointed to succeed Councillor Bayliss as joint leader. You recall that as a committee, you make various appointments at the start of the year in May or June, and there are a number of those which the appointment is the leader of the council, and those are listed at paragraph 3.1 of the report. In some respects, therefore, it is really a case of regularising the position, but the recommendation is that Councillor Mitchell be appointed to the 4 bodies listed there to replace Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Julian. I think David wishes to say something.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. Just to slightly amend the bullets in 3.1, since the report was produced, Councillor Mitchell and officers and the Worcester LEP have agreed that the place on the Worcester LEP board will move to Malvern. It is a post that or a role for members that transfers amongst the local authorities. We have held that post for, I think, 4 years. Before that was Wychavon, and so now seems to be an appropriate time for Malvern to take that. It is a post that's shared between the 3 South Worcestershire councils. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Adrian.
I was going to ask a question about the Worcestershire LEP in the sense that is it still fit for purpose? Because I never hear anything about it anymore. But my question is now altered because I mean I would just want to check those dates and those representations, because we have not been on the Worcestershire LEP as a city council forever until Councillor Bayliss managed to persuade somebody that it was our turn, and now we're losing it again. And the reason for that was because when Councillor Geraghty was leader of this council, he was also involved from the county council's perspective, and they double-hatted him. And that meant that we never got a proper voice around the LEP as a city council. And I objected to this many times when I was leader and when I was deputy leader. And I'm just concerned to make sure that the city council does maintain its voice and its engagement with the LEP in some way or another, even if the decision has already been taken in some smoke-filled room to alter the representation around that table. We should, that we do keep that engagement and understanding what's going on, and that there are proper reports back from those other representatives for the South Worcestershire Councils to us, to Councillor Mitchell as appropriate, and the leadership board. So I would just want to emphasise that really, because even though it does feel a little bit as though the LEP is on its way out, while it is in existence, we do need to maintain those close links and that engagement.
I don't really know how to answer that because I haven't been around. I've not been around long enough to know the history.
If I may, noted, if I may say so. Thank you.
So are we happy to agree the recommendation in paragraph 1.1? With that one amendment?
Yes, that's agreed.
Thank you very much. We're now on to item 11, which is the Cinderella Ground, Worcester under lease. David.
Thank you, Chair. The background to the report, section 2, gives a history of the project, which saw the City Council with the Heart of Worcestershire College really save the Cinderella Ground, the former works ground for Cinderella and Kays, which was a derelict sports ground, and brought that ground back into use. The City Council has a lease from Arndale, the developer that developed the entire site, which runs until 2040. And Heart of Worcestershire College at the moment entered into an agreement to lease and to take an under lease from that to fully manage and maintain the site. The background to that has changed somewhat since the inception of this project for the Heart of Worcestershire College, in the fact that Purdeswell has been developed and their football offer is now very successfully delivered from Purdeswell. From the leisure centre, they have an education centre there as well. Members will recall that we renovated all of the football pitches at Purdeswell and created a high quality facility there. So the Heart of Worcestershire College continue to maintain Cinderella Ground. It was first used for cricket in late 2020. It's a good quality facility, but there are some issues with that, with the Heart of Worcestershire College. The use isn't as intense as really is required to justify the maintenance there. There is a cost that the college are incurring, and they've indicated that they have some difficulties with that, and would really like to remove themselves from that obligation to take on the lease, take on the under lease. We had some discussions with a third party a little while ago that went quite far and didn't come to fruition. Back in the summer, King's School Worcester Foundation came forward with a proposal to take on that under lease from the council directly, and Heart of Worcestershire College would move aside. And those two parties have agreed that, and tonight's proposal is we ask members to also agree to that. Within the report, it talks about the reasons the King's School Worcester Foundation would like the site. I mean, primarily it's an additional facility for themselves to relieve some of the pressure on the rest of the site, give some resilience in times of flood, and also support King's School's commitment to community outreach. I'm sure members will be aware of some of the examples of maintained schools using King's School facilities and some of the joint projects that are listed at 2.18. And some of the proposals for community use at 2.19 are listed there. I just wanted to make it clear that the reference to women's and disabled cricket potentially being based at Cinderella, that's at quite an early stage at the moment, so I wouldn't want to put too much emphasis on that. I just wanted to make that clear. It's a potential proposal for King's. Alongside the lease is a community use agreement, and this is the same community use agreement that's in place with Heart of Worcestershire College. Clearly this is very important for the council, that there is significant community use at the site. To date, that's primarily been Saturday League cricket. Two local clubs, Rushwick and Worcester Nomads, have used that as a second ground for their third 11s. The Taxi Super League have used the ground throughout last season, and also there's been a good deal of Worcestershire junior cricket, county representative junior cricket from the site. There's clearly more potential for further community use. The King's School have the resources to maintain the site to the standard that's required. They have the resources to manage the hire and the community outreach, which aren't core business for Heart of Worcestershire College. So the preferred option is that we move forward with appropriate legal agreements and grant that underlease to the King's School with the community use agreement as is outlined in Appendix B. Just to touch on some of the alternative options that were also considered. We could continue with the current arrangement. Heart of Worcestershire College have indicated that they would be looking to relinquish that lease, so there's a significant risk that they would do so. The council could manage the site directly. The financial implications of that are included in the report, which are sort of upwards of 30,000 purely for the maintenance costs of the ground that the council would incur. It's not our core business. We don't have that sort of maintenance experience in-house for that sort of facility. We could use a third party to try and manage the site. We don't have a third party identified at the moment, and the costs would still be incurred by ourselves if we were to do that. We could surrender the lease and return to the site to the developer. That site would, it's very likely that would then be lost as a sports ground and a facility, and the money that had been invested would be lost as well, that had been invested to keep that as a sports ground. And finally, it would potentially be an option to sort of retain the ground, not maintain it as a sports ground, and have it as some green space within St John's. There would be a clawback of over 115,000 in grants that were received in order to develop the site, and sort of potentially there's reputational risk to the council. There's a good deal of Section 106 money, and time and effort has gone into maintaining that as a sports ground. So for those reasons, those options aren't recommended, but I thought it would be useful to put them before you. So the implications are covered within the main body report, and I've touched on those. So it's recommended to members that officers can grant that under lease to King's School. And like I said, a number of questions, so I'm happy to take those, Chair.
I have Adrian and then Lucy.
Thanks. Firstly, I didn't quite understand why it's not a direct lease with the King's School, because how we're taking how out of the equation. So I don't know why it's called. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know why it's called an underlease or sublease or whatever. I just thought it would be a direct lease with the Kings. And the second thing is really in relation to the 5.5 and 5.6 paragraphs, that how, in not how, but how, question mark, the council can continue to ensure that the use by minority and low-income groups and the usage of the site are monitored and influenced by the council as the ultimate owner.
Chair, the council, to answer the first question, the council has a lease with Arndale, and so we will maintain that lease with Arndale for the life of that, which was the 25-year lease when we took it out. So under the terms of that, we will grant an underlease to the occupier. Within the joint use agreement, there is provision for a steering group, which would involve King's School as the occupier, the City Council, and the Worcestershire Cricket Board, and potentially any other sports governing bodies that would come onto the site. There's been some discussion around football on the site. So twofold really in answer to your question. There is a joint use agreement for community use, and we would have a seat on that steering group that would review things annually.
Thank you. Now I have Lucy.
Can you explain the rent? 1 peppercorn per annum.
Yeah, so we've taken on a lease at no cost, a peppercorn, from the developer, and some of the conditions of that lease is that we don't run that as a profitable going concern. So the original agreement with Heart of Worcestershire College is at Peppercorn. I mean, it is a facility that's quite costly to run. Within the lease and the agreement, there is provision that any surplus, should a surplus to be made, and evidence to date is that may be unlikely or difficult to achieve, that would be open book accounted, and that would also need to be invested back in the site and the facilities on that site. Does that answer your question? Well, there is no cost. There is no annual cost to lease. So it is a peppercorn lease. Yeah.
Through you, Chair. The term peppercorn is an old accounting term where it goes back to a time when actually a peppercorn was used to confirm a transaction. More commonly now, it's just a pound. So it transfers on a pound.
I'm allowed to talk again in committee. No, that's cool.
Well, I thought I had Pat next, actually. Okay, we'll go for Pat next, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think in general this is rather welcome because it does provide for the maintenance and use, a better use of the ground than is currently possible. I would have liked to see a slightly stronger emphasis on the equality side of things and some outcomes associated with it, because I don't see very much concerning, say, women's football, for example, which, I mean, considering how successful our women footballers are these days, it would be nice to think that we would in future be providing some of those footballers at national level, and in large teams. Stuff like that. I'd like to see some outcomes, really. Equalities outcomes, or some kind of negotiated equalities outcomes of some sort. And perhaps Sean could help with that.
Thank you. It's a good point, well made. I think in terms of specific outcomes, and you made a specific reference to women's football, it's quite difficult in a length of agreement of this, an agreement of this length, to be very specific about particular organisations. Because of course you need those organisations to be robust and be able to sign up to something for the longer term. But certainly within the steering group, we take the point about having that focus. That is the intention. Perhaps it's not as specific as it could be in the paper.
So you will have somebody who really knows their way around equalities on that steering group.
Yes, and there'll be a council officer on the steering group, and clearly that's.
I'm not sure that's enough, actually. I really want to know that whoever it is knows their way around equalities in a detailed sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can undertake that our equalities officer will have an influence on this. They may not be our representative, but they'll certainly have an overview and influence on this.
Thank you. I now have James.
Chair, thank you. And I mean, my point is developing Adrian's point, which he may have been his supplementary. It's the extent to which community involvement in this is kind of formalised. Because yes, there is going to be a degree of oversight. We get that, and that's welcome. But how much formal community outreach stuff is in the present contract, and how much of that will be transferred to the new contract? Because I think the key thing is, yeah, we all want this to be a success, and KSW have got quite a lengthy list of impressive links and connections with the wider community. I get that, but in terms of the specifics of the contract, I think it's kind of important that this is actually embedded in from the word go. That the community does have a real right to expect the facility to be at least proportionately theirs.
The specifics that are written in, so this is the same agreement that was agreed with Heart of Worcestershire College previously came through. So just to touch on those for you, recreational club cricket on Saturdays during the cricket season, community cricket clubs and junior representative cricket on Sundays during the cricket season, availability at various periods throughout the cricket season for Worcestershire Cricket Board competitions, subject to availability and demand, junior football pitches to be available to local clubs outside of the cricket season, casual use, which would be ad hoc hire, subject to availability, and then any additional community use that doesn't involve in overplaying the pitches. Now, that's not perhaps as specific as it might be in terms of a schedule and a rota, but this is a developing arrangement, I think, and King's School want to use this as a school facility, so the two will need to work hand in hand.
Do we have any more questions or comments? Oh, of course, sorry, Adrian, and then Steve.
I'm sorry, I just sit here quietly, Chair. It's okay. No, you talk about a steering committee, and there's no reference in this to a steering committee. I can find a review committee, but I can't find a steering committee. Are they two different things?
It's my formal words. Apologies, Adrian. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one in answer in some ways to Councillor Eggers, perhaps a question about community use. The Appendix B is quite clear about what KSW's responsibilities will be, and includes the fact that it agrees to make the sports facilities available for community use in accordance with the provisions, and the targets shall use reasonable endeavours to achieve community use targets in line with appropriate sports development strategies, including making a contribution to local participation targets for sporting and physical activity. So I think as far as possible within the agreement, I think they're trying to cover all bases without being absolutely specific on exactly what sports and what and who will participate can be.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? I just wanted to make a completely off-the-wall comment about its name, Cinderella. I believe it's called the Cinderella Ground because there used to be some Cinderella shoes. I wonder whether it would be better with a different name. No, I know. I'm.
Building. So no.
I knew that wouldn't go down well. My concern was about the word Cinderella. I think it has a kind of it has a kind of emotional significance of something that's a bit run down, you know, and it doesn't. More comments on that. Can I ask people to agree the recommendation in paragraph 1? Okay. I'm not. Nobody has informed me of any other business, so I don't think there is any. So now we move to part 2. And I invite you to pass the following resolution. The resolution in section 13, which I will not read out to you unless I'm supposed to.
Asking the committee to press and public, so that's agreed.
Okay, so is everyone